When did humans start using magic mushrooms? In 1955, a banker from New York traveled deep into the mountains of southern Mexico, sat on a dirt floor in a small village, and ate a handful of mushrooms handed to him by an old woman. His name was Gordon Wasson. He was not a scientist. He was a vice president at a major bank. And that night, in a candlelit room, he became one of the first outsiders ever invited into a ceremony that had been kept secret from the Western world for 400 years. The old woman was a healer named Maria Sabina. The mushrooms were sacred, and when Wasson went home and published what happened to him, he kicked open a door that the people of that village had spent centuries trying to keep shut. But here's the thing, Maria Sabina wasn't the start of this story. She was near the end of it, because humans had already been eating these mushrooms for thousands of years before she was born, maybe way longer. And honestly, the beginning of this story is a lot funnier than you'd expect. Let's go back. Way back, before banks, before villages, before farming, before anyone had invented the concept of a bad idea. Picture one of your ancestors, hungry, wandering the grasslands of Africa, following a herd of animals, because where the animals go, the food goes. And these animals leave behind one thing in enormous quantities: dung. And growing right out of that dung is a little pale mushroom with a curved cap. Now put yourself in this guy's shoes. You haven't eaten in 2 days. You are not a botanist. Your entire food testing strategy is put it in mouth. Find out later. So he looks at this mushroom, growing out of a pile of poop, and thinks the ancient equivalent of, yeah, that'll do. He eats it. And about 30 minutes later, the sky starts breathing. He doesn't have a word for what's happening, because words barely exist yet. He just knows the rock he's staring at is now extremely interesting. The grass is whispering, and he has suddenly developed very strong feelings about the moon. That's the part nobody can prove. Mushrooms don't fossilize. A mushroom eaten 2 million years ago leaves nothing behind. No bone, no tool, no trace. Just one very confused ancestor and a story he could never fully explain when he got back. But you can imagine that conversation. Him, wide-eyed, trying to describe colors that don't exist while the group slowly backs away. And then somebody goes, "Okay, but where exactly did you find it?" Because that's the other half of being human. We don't just stumble into things. We go back for seconds. So archaeologists do something clever. If they can't find the mushrooms, they look for the people who drew them. And our ancestors were obsessed with drawing this stuff. Deep in the Sahara Desert, in a region called Tassili Nadjer, there are rock paintings as old as 9,000 years. In some of them, human figures are covered head to toe in mushroom shapes. One famous figure is running, holding fistfuls of mushrooms with strange lines pouring out of his head, like something is leaking out of his mind. Nobody can prove what that artist meant, but a man covered in mushrooms with his brain visibly leaking out of his skull is not a subtle painting, and here's the pattern that shows up everywhere. By the time humans bother to record this, it has stopped being about food. They're not painting which mushroom is most nutritious. They're painting a man becoming one with the cosmos. Travel into Europe and the clues keep coming. In Spain, a cave called Selva Pascuala has a painting around 6,000 years old showing a neat row of mushrooms that researchers think match a local hallucinogenic species. Somewhere out there is a Stone Age artist who looked at a wall and thought, you know what this cave needs? A menu. These people couldn't write, so they left the next best thing. Pictures, on stone, of the one experience they couldn't put into words. Now cross the ocean, because this is where it stops being a guess and starts being undeniable. In Central America, across Mexico and Guatemala, archaeologists have dug up dozens of small stone carvings shaped like mushrooms, some with a little face carved into the stem. Some are over 2,000 years old. They're called mushroom stones, and they weren't decorations, they were sacred objects. The Maya and the Aztecs had a name for these mushrooms, Teonanacatl. It is usually translated as flesh of the gods. Sit with that for a second. These people had access to plenty of fun things, and out of everything in their world, this is the one they decided was made of God. You can picture the ceremony. A circle of people in the firelight, total silence. Everyone takes the sacred mushroom together. And then, one by one, they all slowly turn to look at the same tree. And the tree is, for some reason, the funniest thing any of them has ever seen. That is also a religious experience. Don't let anyone tell you it isn't. When the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, they watched native people eat these mushrooms and describe visions, voices, and something divine. And the Spanish, being the Spanish, decided this was clearly the work of the devil. So they banned it. They burned the records. They drove the whole thing underground, and it almost worked. For 400 years, the outside world assumed it was gone. until a curious New York banker sat down on a dirt floor in 1955 and discovered the practice had quietly survived the entire time, passed in whispers from one healer to the next right under everyone's nose. Which brings us to a question stranger than the history. Why did humans scattered across the planet with zero contact keep independently reaching for the exact same experience? The answer is hiding inside your own skull. Your brain is covered in receptors, tiny biological locks. And the compound inside these mushrooms, psilocybin, fits one of them almost perfectly, slotting right into the system that runs your mood and the way you see the world. But here's the twist that gets everybody. That lock did not evolve because of mushrooms. It was already there. Your brain makes its own chemicals that fit it. The mushroom didn't build the lock. It just showed up 2 million years ago holding a spare key to a door you didn't know you had. So when that first hungry ancestor ate one, his brain didn't reject it. The door was already built. The mushroom just knew the address, and that's probably why this habit is so ancient and universal. We didn't have to learn to be affected by it. We were wired for it from the factory, because the urge to mess with your own mind isn't a rare glitch. It shows up in every human culture ever found. People fermented drinks, chewed leaves, breathed smoke, ate questionable plants on purpose, all knowing it would scramble their brains, and all going worth it. One scientist argued this drive sits right next to hunger and thirst as a basic need, and it's not even just us. In Siberia, reindeer seek out a hallucinogenic mushroom in the snow and stagger around for hours. Elephants go out of their way for fermented fruit. The desire to get out of your own head isn't a human invention. It's built into nature itself. We just took it the most seriously. Now think about what this meant for a person 10,000 years ago. No science, no medicine, no explanation for death or grief, or why the sun disappears in winter and you might not survive it. The world is terrifying and makes no sense. And then one night, you eat this thing, and your mind cracks open in a direction it has never gone before. The colors, the voices, the overwhelming sense that something enormous and alive is out there. And for a few hours, you are touching it. You're not going to call that a chemical reaction. You don't know what a chemical is. You're going to call it a god, obviously. And so they did what humans always do with the inexplicable. They built a whole job around it. The person who knew the right dose, the right ritual, how to come back in one piece became one of the most important people alive. Not the strongest hunter, the one who could walk through the door to the other side and come back with answers. In Siberia, shamans built their whole spiritual world around this, believing they could fly, speak to the dead, and heal the sick. In Mexico, healers like Maria Sabina used the mushrooms to diagnose illness and talk to the spirits of the dead. Different continents, no contact, and yet they all landed on the same conclusion. This is not ordinary. This one is holy. For thousands of years, that's how it stayed. Sacred, protected. And then the modern world showed up and absolutely fumbled it. After Wasson published his story, scientists raced to study these things in the 1950s and 60s. For a brief moment, it looked like the West might take them seriously. Then the culture turned, governments panicked, and by 1971, psilocybin got slapped into the most restricted legal category that exists. The same one as heroin. A mushroom that grows on its own out of cow dung in a field now legally as dangerous as heroin. Research basically stopped. For decades, studying these mushrooms seriously was a great way to end your career. And there's a sad footnote. Maria Sabina, the healer who shared her ceremony with the world, paid the worst price of anyone. Once Wasson's story got out, her village was flooded with outsiders chasing visions. Her own community blamed her for giving away something sacred. Her house was burned down. She died poor and rejected by the people she'd spent her life healing, all for sharing a secret with a world that mostly just wanted to get high. Let's put this in perspective. Humans have probably eaten these mushrooms for thousands and thousands of years. We've treated them as forbidden for about 50. That's not even a footnote. That's a typo. For almost our entire existence, this thing was sacred, painted onto cave walls, carved into stone gods, called the flesh of the gods. We don't know the exact day it began, and we never will. That first chapter got eaten and forgotten on a grassland before anyone could write a word down. But everything that came after, the cave paintings, the stone gods, the secret ceremonies, the banker on the dirt floor, all of it traces back to one perfectly human moment. A hungry animal with nothing to lose ate something it did not understand off the top of a pile of dung and felt its mind open in a direction it had never gone before. And then it did the most human thing of all. It went and told a friend, because we didn't invent the urge to reach past the ordinary world, we just inherited it from a very brave, very hungry ancestor who really should not have eaten that, and absolutely did anyway.